The spaceship descended slowly toward the floating city of Xylar, a place where the most brilliant minds of the galaxy gathered. Tall towers shimmered with light, and strange floating platforms connected buildings that seemed to touch the clouds. Students from hundreds of planets walked through the streets, their skin glowing in colors Earth had never seen, and their eyes sparkled with curiosity and knowledge. Among them, a young human named Ethan stood nervously, gripping his small backpack, his heart beating fast. He had traveled across light years to this alien academy, the most advanced school in the galaxy. But now that he was here, he felt small and fragile. Every student seemed so confident, their movements precise, their clothes glowing with strange energy. Ethan's Earth uniform looked plain and simple in comparison, and he felt the weight of every alien gaze on him. As he walked into the main hall, he saw a figure standing at the center of the floating amphitheater. The alien professor was massive, with 4 arms, a head that shimmered with silver light, and eyes that seemed to see straight into the soul. He looked around the hall, his gaze pausing on Ethan, and a loud, mocking laugh echoed across the classroom. "Earth," the professor said, his voice deep and cold, "we wonder why you even came here." Other students giggled, whispering and pointing at Ethan. He felt the heat rise in his cheeks, but he did not step back. He squared his shoulders and tried to appear calm. The professor clapped his hands, and a holographic display appeared in the air, showing planets, stars, and strange devices. "Today, I will give all of you a task," he said, his 4 arms gesturing toward the floating symbols. "This is a challenge no student has ever completed, and I do not expect Earth to succeed." The words hit Ethan like a wave, but instead of fear, a spark of determination lit inside him. He remembered why he had come here, to prove that humans, though small and young in galactic terms, could do great things. The professor continued, "You will design a device capable of sustaining life on a planet without a star. The solution must work under conditions you cannot imagine, and it must be completed before the cycle of the twin suns ends." Aliens gasped at the difficulty, and some laughed, looking at Ethan with disbelief. Even the strongest students whispered, "Impossible, no one can do this." Ethan walked toward his assigned station, a small platform with strange alien tools floating in mid-air. He studied the materials carefully, noticing that everything seemed unfamiliar, but also full of potential. Around him, other students immediately started using complex alien formulas, their hands glowing as they manipulated energy fields. Ethan watched quietly, trying to understand how the aliens approached the problem. But he knew Earth logic was different, and sometimes, the simple ideas of humans could succeed where complicated plans failed. As the first hour passed, Ethan felt the weight of doubt, but he also felt excitement. He began sketching ideas in his mind, imagining machines that could harness energy in ways the aliens did not think possible. The professor walked among the students, observing their work, his eyes narrowing as he paused near Ethan. "Do you even understand the scale of this challenge, human?" he asked, a hint of mockery in his voice. Ethan smiled slightly, not with arrogance, but with quiet confidence. "I will do my best, Professor," he replied, and though the words were simple, they carried courage. The professor's expression changed for a brief moment, a flicker of curiosity replacing the mockery. He moved on, leaving Ethan to his thoughts, but the seed of respect had already begun to grow. As the twin suns slowly moved across the sky, the hall buzzed with energy. Some students laughed, some panicked, but Ethan worked steadily, imagining a future where humans could stand among the stars. The impossible task loomed ahead, but he was ready to begin, and in that moment, a story of courage, wit, and determination started to unfold. The next day, the main hall was alive with energy. Students from every corner of the galaxy gathered around their workstations, floating tools and holograms spinning in the air. Ethan walked toward his station, his mind buzzing with ideas. He knew that the professor's challenge was called impossible for a reason, but he also knew that humans often saw solutions others could not. The alien professor floated to the center, his silver head shining under the twin suns. "Today, you will begin the task of creating a device that can sustain life on a planet without a star," he announced, his voice echoing. "Many of you will fail, and I expect Earth to fail first," he said, pointing one glowing arm at Ethan. A wave of laughter spread through the hall, alien voices mixing with glowing hums of energy. Ethan felt a sharp pang of nervousness, but he swallowed it, taking a deep breath. He reminded himself that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act in spite of it. Around him, other students immediately activated their devices, hands glowing as they manipulated alien energy. Machines rose into the air, spinning, vibrating, and humming. The humans' methods were slow, deliberate, and precise, but most aliens dismissed them as primitive. Some aliens whispered to each other, "The human will never manage this, it is impossible." Ethan ignored the whispers, focusing on his own plan. He examined the materials carefully, noticing that the strange crystals and metals could store energy in ways that no alien had thought to use. Hours passed, and frustration began to grow in the hall. Many aliens struggled with their machines, sparks flying, systems failing. Ethan worked quietly, testing small combinations, connecting energy fields with careful precision. He made mistakes, of course, but each mistake taught him something new. Unlike the aliens, who often relied on complex formulas and rigid procedures, Ethan trusted his instincts and simple logic. The professor moved slowly between the stations, observing. When he reached Ethan, he paused, his silver eyes narrowing. "You are human," he said, his voice low, "and humans rarely survive this task. Tell me, how do you intend to succeed?" Ethan looked up, his expression calm. "By trying, Professor, and thinking differently," he said. The professor's lips twitched, a faint hint of a smile, but he said nothing else, moving on. Other students watched, curious, wondering how a human could remain so calm while others panicked. By midday, the hall was full of energy, tension, and strange noises. Some alien machines exploded in bright flashes, sending students stumbling back. Ethan's workstation glowed softly, small circuits floating in the air, humming steadily. He connected crystals in a way that no alien had considered. Energy flowed smoothly, balanced and controlled. The device was small, simple, but Ethan knew it could solve the impossible problem if completed. A sudden spark flew from a nearby alien's device, hitting Ethan's workstation. He froze for a moment, but quickly adapted, rerouting the energy in his circuits. Not only did the spark not ruin his device, it made it stronger. Other students gasped, realizing that the human had turned disaster into advantage. The alien professor stopped in his tracks, tilting his head. "Interesting," he muttered, his voice low, almost inaudible. Ethan did not notice the comment, his focus absolute. The impossible task was far from over, but he had already shown that humans could think in ways aliens could not. As the twin suns moved across the sky, the hall buzzed with a mixture of fear, excitement, and disbelief. Ethan worked steadily, quietly preparing for the moment when the impossible would become possible. The classroom grew quiet as the alien students focused on their machines. Ethan worked steadily, his eyes scanning the floating circuits, thinking carefully about every connection. He moved slowly, deliberately, testing one idea after another. The more he worked, the more he realized that the alien devices were often too complex. They relied on formulas and energy patterns that only the aliens could understand. Ethan knew that simplicity and creativity were his strength. He began to imagine a new way to store energy using the crystals and metals. Something small, yet powerful, something that no alien had ever considered. As the hours passed, whispers spread among the students. Some aliens stared at Ethan, shaking their heads in disbelief. "How can a human survive this challenge?" one student asked. "They will fail," said another. "It is impossible for Earth to do what we can." But Ethan ignored them, focusing on his own work. He sketched designs in his mind, connecting energy circuits in patterns that looked strange but seemed perfect to him. Then, something unexpected happened. A tall alien student with glowing blue skin approached Ethan's station. He pretended to admire Ethan's work, but his eyes glimmered with jealousy. Quickly, he moved one of Ethan's floating circuits, hoping it would break the flow of energy. Ethan noticed the subtle change immediately, his eyes narrowing. Instead of panicking, he smiled slightly. "This will make it even better," he whispered to himself. He adjusted the circuits, rerouted the energy, and discovered that the spark had strengthened the device. Energy flowed more smoothly than before, and the small device began to hum with stability. The alien student's plan had backfired, and Ethan's quiet genius had turned sabotage into advantage. The professor moved slowly through the classroom, observing every student. He stopped briefly near Ethan, his silver eyes blinking in surprise. "Interesting," he murmured, almost to himself. The alien professor had seen many students fail, but something about the human caught his attention. Ethan did not look up, his focus absolute. Every moment was precious, and he knew the impossible task required not only skill but patience. By mid-afternoon, the tension in the classroom had reached a peak. Some alien machines were failing, sparking, and shaking. Students shouted in panic, trying to fix their work. Ethan's workstation, however, glowed softly and steadily. The small device floated in midair, circuits connecting like a delicate web. It seemed fragile, yet the energy inside it flowed perfectly. Other students began to notice, their whispers growing louder. "Look at the human," one said. "Their device is still working." Some aliens shook their heads, unwilling to admit it, but curiosity burned in their eyes. Ethan paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. He reviewed the energy flow, making small adjustments with his hands. The device began to hum louder, brighter, and steadier. He realized that the key was not power or complexity, but balance and clever thinking. The human mind, even so young, could see patterns the aliens had missed. As the professor observed, his lips curved slightly, a hint of respect in his expression. Ethan continued to work, quietly, patiently, turning the impossible into something that might just be possible. The twin suns began to shift, casting long shadows across the classroom. Ethan's small device floated in the air, humming, glowing, and perfectly aligned. The impossible task was far from finished, but for the first time, the impossible seemed achievable. The human student had proven that courage, creativity, and calm thinking could match even the greatest alien minds. And in the quiet hum of his device, a secret genius was quietly changing the fate of the class. The day of the presentation finally arrived. The classroom was silent, every student and teacher focused on the challenge. The alien professor floated to the center, his 4 arms gleaming in the light. "Today," he announced, "you will show your solutions, and we will see who can solve the impossible task." Whispers spread across the hall, some students confident, some nervous, but all eyes were on Ethan. He stepped forward calmly, carrying his small, glowing device. The aliens laughed quietly, some shaking their heads, unable to imagine that a human could succeed. Ethan placed the device in the center of the amphitheater. The small machine floated in midair, circuits glowing, humming with energy. He pressed a single button, and a soft pulse ran through the room. Suddenly, the holographic planet appeared above the device, dark and cold. The challenge had been to sustain life on this starless planet. All the alien students watched in disbelief as the device projected energy streams into the holographic world. The frozen surface began to glow, small green patches appearing. Water formed in thin streams, air started circulating, and tiny lights blinked like the first signs of life. Gasps echoed across the room. Aliens who had mocked Ethan were now staring in shock, unable to believe their eyes. Some whispered, "It works, the human did it, impossible." The alien professor's silver eyes widened, his usual mockery gone, replaced by surprise and curiosity. "Impossible, how?" he muttered, his voice trailing off. Ethan stood quietly, not proud, not arrogant, just calm. He had done what no one expected, proving that humans could think differently and succeed where others failed. One by one, the other students tried to test their devices. Sparks flew, energy went out of control, and machines failed. Their complicated alien formulas and powerful energy fields could not match the simplicity and cleverness of Ethan's design. The professor observed silently, floating closer to Ethan's device. "Explain your method, human," he said, his voice steady but curious. Ethan took a deep breath. "I used balance, not power, and simple energy flows, Professor." "Sometimes the simplest path is the strongest path," he said. The professor's lips twitched, almost a smile. He had never expected a human to speak with such confidence and understanding. The classroom erupted in murmurs and whispers. Some students nodded slowly, impressed, while others could not hide their jealousy. Even the student who tried to sabotage Ethan's device earlier looked stunned. Ethan's quiet genius had turned failure into triumph. The holographic planet above glowed with life, a perfect display of the impossible task completed. The alien professor floated above the device, studying it closely. "You have exceeded expectations, human," he finally said. For the first time, his voice carried respect. The other students looked at Ethan with a mixture of awe and disbelief. They had laughed at him before, but now they understood that Earth had potential. Ethan smiled slightly, looking at the glowing holographic planet. He knew this was only the beginning. The impossible task had been solved, but many challenges would come. He had proven that courage, creativity, and calm thinking could stand against the galaxy's most brilliant minds. And as the twin suns began to set, casting golden light across the hall, the human student had become a legend, at least for this day. The impossible had been made possible, and the aliens had no choice but to take notice. The classroom was filled with a mixture of awe and quiet excitement. Aliens who had laughed at Ethan earlier now looked at him with surprise and respect. The small human had completed the impossible task, a feat no one thought possible. The holographic planet above the floating device glowed with life, water flowing, air circulating, and energy shining in perfect balance. Ethan stood calmly, watching the reactions around him. He did not boast or shout, he simply allowed the results to speak for themselves. The alien professor floated slowly toward him, his forearms folded, eyes studying the human carefully. For a moment, the room was silent, everyone waiting for his words. Finally, the professor spoke, his voice steady. "Human, you have exceeded all expectations. You have proven that courage, intelligence, and creativity are not limited by size, species, or age. You have shown us that Earth is not as weak as we believed." The students gasped at the rare praise. Even the student who had tried to sabotage Ethan nodded, a hint of admiration in their eyes. Ethan smiled slightly, feeling a quiet pride. He had come to the Alien Academy not to prove others wrong, but to prove to himself that humans could compete among the stars. And now, he had done just that. Some of the alien students approached him cautiously, asking questions about his design and methods. Ethan explained simply, using words and ideas that were easy to understand. He showed them that sometimes the simplest path could solve the most complicated problems. The aliens listened carefully, learning from the human who had stunned them all. The professor clapped his hands, a rare gesture of approval. "Class," he said, "today we have learned something valuable. Sometimes the smallest mind can see the biggest solution. Let this human success remind you that arrogance and doubt can blind even the brightest minds." The hall echoed with murmurs of agreement. Ethan felt a warm glow of satisfaction, knowing that his work had not only solved the impossible task but had also inspired others. As the twin suns began to set, casting long shadows across the hall, Ethan packed his small device carefully, preparing to leave the amphitheater. He felt the eyes of the class on him, not in mockery, but in admiration. The impossible task was complete, and the human had not only survived but triumphed. He had earned respect from aliens who had once dismissed Earth as weak. And more importantly, he had proven to himself that humans could shine even among the stars. The professor leaned closer, his silver eyes glimmering. "Human," he said quietly, "this is only the beginning. Many challenges await you and your species in this galaxy. I will be watching." Ethan nodded, understanding that the adventure was far from over. He had completed one impossible task, but the universe was full of greater challenges. And he was ready. As the students left the hall, talking excitedly about what they had seen, Ethan stayed a moment longer, looking at the glowing holographic planet. A small smile appeared on his face. He had turned fear into courage, doubt into success, and the impossible into reality. And as the sun set behind the floating city of Xylar, the story of the human genius who stunned the aliens was only just beginning. The legend of Earth's potential had begun, and the galaxy would never forget it.